Thank you for joining us here for the Ex-Believers panel. The International Humanist and Ethical Union, in their Amsterdam Declaration, states that there are concerns with the effects of dogmatic religion, a religion that promotes belief over change over time based on experience and evidence. Our problem is not with religious people. We support people who believe and their right to believe. Our concern is with dogmatism and an unwillingness to change and adapt and grow as our experiences change and adapt and grow. So, joining us here today are three gentlemen who have come from dogmatic religions in their past, or have come from families that were mired in dogmatism. And they're going to talk to us today about their experiences, their lives, and their viewpoints now. I think not all of them would describe themselves as atheists or humanists, but that's not the point. Like I said, we support religious people and their right to believe, but we applaud their movement away from dogmatic thinking. So let me take a second to introduce them. First of all, you met yesterday, is Michael Bigelow, in from Macau. Here, two local boys, we have Alton Thompson and Dennis Dz. Is that right? That's not your real name.
It's close enough. That's Dz.
Dz.
Yeah, a lot of these and a lot of these.
We'll stick with Dz.
Yeah.
All right. So, I've prepared some questions to ask these guys, and they have been so kind as to prepare some responses. So, we'll start with Michael, and I'll be asking the same question to each guy. So let's start. So, Michael, will you tell us, what was your religious upbringing or religious history?
Well, as I explained yesterday, I was raised in a family, an extended family of Jehovah's Witnesses. So most people had probably either met Jehovah's Witnesses or seen them offering literature on the street, or maybe even had them knock on your door. But I thought, rather than talk about my beliefs, I would go into a regular week. Monday would be a typical school day. School is one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Was a tough thing. You try to kind of isolate yourself and not let people know the wacky things that you believe. And then Monday night, we would always have a family study where my parents would select something from Watchtower or Jehovah's Witness publications, and we'd have a family study for an hour. And then on Tuesday, normal school day again, but then Tuesday evening, we would go to someone's private home where 3 or 4 families would gather, and you would study prepared material. Wednesday, another school day. Wednesday night, nothing about religion. Thursday, another school day, but then Thursday night, go to the Kingdom Hall for 2 hours. Talks, Bible readings, and also a class that your parents enrolled you in from very young to train you to be a public speaker. So that when you knocked on somebody's door, you could present your message in a fairly effective way. Friday, day off. Saturday morning, up early, so that you could go out in the evangelizing work, typically for 2 or 3 hours every Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, you get to do whatever kids do. Sunday morning, back at the Kingdom Hall for 2 hours to study the Watchtower, which is Jehovah's Witnesses' primary source of information. And a 1-hour public talk, and then the week's over. If it sounds like being a Jehovah's Witness kid is all-encompassing, it is. 100% of your life is targeted toward pleasing God, making sure that you live through Armageddon, making sure that you do a good job telling other people about the risks of not accepting the message of Jehovah's Witnesses, all in the hopes that you can live through that tumultuous Armageddon event and live forever on this beautiful new paradise earth.
Thank you. Alton?
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here, and Wade, thanks for inviting me. Let's see, well, today I'm a conductor. I work in classical music, and my background, and interestingly enough, I think I was raised, my family we had a large number of fundamentalists who belonged to a certain sect of disciples of Christ, where Church of Christ, where actually instrumental music was not used in worship, because God didn't ask you to do this, so you don't do it. Basically, the approach would be fairly labeled fundamentalist. You take the Bible is the Word of God, and because it's the Word of God, the way you're supposed to treat it with respect is you're supposed to take it as literally as possible. The assumption being that the way you show respect to a text is you take it literally. It's more respectful to take it literally than it is to take it symbolically. This is built in. I've had chances to reflect on this since. I think this approach, historically, you can see this approach owes a lot, actually, to the 18th century Enlightenment. It actually owes a lot to the rise of science. As science gains ground, there's progress in combating disease, there's progress in technology, and as scientists begin to say, well, we don't do a lot of superstition here, this is fact, we use data. You also see, like a Newtonian reaction, equal and opposite reaction, you see fundamentalism arise, where basically they're saying, we have our holy book, and our holy book is data. It's the data. And we're going to use this book like data, and we're going to treat it like scientists treat their data. We're going to apply logic. We're going to take everything literally. It's a treatise. It's like a math calculation. There's no debate here, okay? Because symbols are less value. We can't say there's something symbolic here. It has less value. So that assumption being built in led them to, well, if you want your religion to have the status of science, then you have to treat your holy book like science. And we have the debates, of course, about science class and so on, what would be taught. Well, anyway, in terms of my own upbringing, typically the family would attend a church service 3 times a week, and you're expected to be there, and you wouldn't miss it. No instrumental music, no dancing, no alcohol. What else to say about that? Well, something else I've had a chance to reflect on. Not everybody would do that. If you were in a church or something that had this sort of pattern, there were the people that came on Sunday morning and then you didn't see them the other 2 or 3 times a week. And kind of the going thing from the pulpit was these people you only saw on Sunday morning or you only saw on religious holidays, and they're not there the rest of the time. They're the lukewarm people. You know, they're not on fire for God. They should be there more often. And there was this. And in reflecting on it since, you know, I think there's healthy and unhealthy ways to be religious. There's healthy and unhealthy ways to be, I guess, anything. But I've thought, boy, I think the lukewarm people had it about right, you know? I think they had a place for this and they had a place for other things, and they had some moderation there. I think maybe where things go wrong is you get distorted, you know? But anyway, just, I guess, that would be a fundamentalist, and then I can tell you a little bit more about evolution after that. Thanks.
Oh, Dennis?
Hi. So I was raised Catholic, and I say that I still feel guilty about that. And I guess sort of the effect of religion happened on me, like, you know, I was circumcised, and then there was an attempted drowning at about one year old. But honestly, I guess my family was about a lukewarm family up until about 4th grade when I entered private Catholic junior high, and then, or elementary school, whatever. And from then, you know, like it became institutionalized that I was taught it in school. And yeah, it obviously had a big effect on me in terms of like what was okay and what was not okay. And you can imagine growing up and becoming more interested in women and knowing that sort of that was a big no-no, it was a big sin, and then you would go to hell, and nobody wants to do that. So my upbringing was, you know, it was Catholic, and it was a part of who we were, and that meant a lot of things about how we felt about ourselves in the world. And that's all I can say about that.
Actually, why don't you stay up? I'll ask you the next one right away. Next question. What eventually led you to leave or change your religion?
Okay, I guess from most of the time it seems like I never believed it completely. It always seemed a bit like make-believe. And I guess the more I experimented, honestly, with different things, like maybe some psychedelic drugs and like marijuana, like I began to really question things like that. And I guess, yeah, it was the experimenting and growing up and challenging the ideas, because it's a dogma, right? You're not supposed to challenge this or that idea. And I did, and I found that they didn't hold water. And so, although growing up, it was easy for me to kind of think that it was make-believe. The more I challenged and the more I saw that there weren't sort of bad consequences for challenging the beliefs, I became bolder, and until I was able to say, okay, I don't really believe that, you know, Jesus Christ is the risen Lord of himself, or risen Son of himself, however it works.
Okay. Yeah, great. Alton?
I guess for me, it was as a young adult, you know, in my 20s, basically the world was too big for the God I knew that was supposed to be behind it, responsible for it. And when that's the only God you know, then it goes overboard. So I was an atheist and an agnostic for a while. And came to a place, I'd say, more of intuition. What I felt religion was really about, it was not maybe the promise of an afterlife. Not all religions promise that. And it's not even a deity or a personal deity, because not all religions promise that. But I think maybe what they have in common was that life has meaning. And it's a way of sharing in a community. How does life have meaning? And there are symbols, you know, to try to codify this. Ultimately, it's a personal decision, but the experiences people have, they have put together in this way. And I found some use for that as an intuition, coming at it as an artist, mainly. I had very strong intuition. Yes, there's a meaning to life. There's a difference between a life well lived and a life maybe not lived so healthily, and this sort of thing. And for a while then, through my 20s and 30s, made myself comfortable in mainline Christian religion. The Episcopal Church, you say the creed, you can think anything you want about the creed, but you say it. The ritual is there, this connection with history is here, connection with ancestors is here, but you can think what you want, you know, and it's fine. And then through a friend, I got interested in Lao Tzu and Dao De Jing. And basically with Lao Tzu, I felt like he did a pretty good job of saying what you could say and not saying too much, and then drawing that out. So today, if someone asks, or, you know, your religion or your faith, I'll say philosophical Taoist, whatever the term would be. And you postulate there's an ultimate unity, an ultimate source, but you don't say much about it because you can't say much about it. It's bigger than your head. You'll never get it in your head. You'll never be able to get it into an idea. And you leave some room for mystery, and you leave some room for questions. So that would be the answer to that question, I think.
All right, thank you so much. Michael?
How I exited, or why I exited, was kind of a tough story. You know, starting in the 90s, I really got serious. I was seriously into the religion. I was already serving as an elder in the United States, but at the same time, I was conducting regular trips to the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. I was guiding climbing trips, trekking trips, and the geology of the area is just so ripe for inquiry, because not only are there living glaciers in the Sierras, but there is also evidence of extinct glaciers. And that started to kind of gnaw away in my head, because Jehovah's Witnesses teach a literal flood story. So when Jehovah's Witnesses see a mountain or they see a glacier, any landform, the default position is this was underwater 4,400 years ago, or it's a new landform that developed after that. And starting in the early 2000s maybe, that really, it just kind of started to stick in my brain. And I finally bought a book about the glacial history of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it just, the vastness of geological time just struck me. And that led to more research relating to tree rings and carbon dating, which obviously witnesses say doesn't work, it's not real. And then stone ages and human migration patterns, and the whole thing started to fall apart. And about the same time, December 26, 2004, we had that horrible earthquake and tsunami down in Indonesia. And that was really the last straw for me. There was this image that's still in my head. A woman is on her back, she's in this bluish state of rigor mortis. And I had a simple equation. It was either God did this, or he stood by and watched it happen. And it was several years later that it finally dawned on me that I was looking at a binary thing, choice A or choice B, when really I hadn't considered the most likely case is that he wasn't there anyway. So it still took a few more years because I was a minister, but eventually I was able to find a way to quit and get out.
Thank you. Alton, I guess we'll give you this next one first. You touched on it, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about your current beliefs, how you define it, what they mean to you in your life?
Okay, well, let's see. The way there's many different ideas about Lao Tzu or Tao Te Ching, I guess, as anybody who's read the book would say. I would not claim to be a scholar on it, just the ideas I found useful in it. Tao is, people often say you can't translate it out of Chinese into another language, but many people also say it's not really, you can't even translate it into Chinese. He's trying to find a word to refer to ultimate reality. He says there's an ultimate unity, and all the novelty, individual things that we see come out of an ultimate unity, an ultimate source, and go back to that. And his metaphor is breathing. And the unity breathes out into all these forms, breathes back in, and they become one. And this will happen to us, and it will happen to the desk and everything we see. It doesn't say much beyond that. His metaphors for that ultimate unity are impersonal. He often compares it practically to a path, how you live your life, but also to water and some other things. All right, what this has suggested to me is that it's valuable to me as an artist. I responded to it as an artist because there's a place for ambiguity. Many of you may be familiar with Rainer Maria Rilke. He's a poet who wrote letters to a young poet, right? And he talks to a young poet who has questions about the existence of God and some of these things. And he says, you know, how would you know? God is this big thing. How would you know? He said, why not just treasure the questions you have? Don't worry so much about whether you have the answers. Treasure the questions now, as you would treasure something valuable in a room, and it's locked and it's sealed. Live the questions, and then someday you may live into an answer. Okay, with that, ambiguity is a rich source of art, and I noticed that as you go around the world, there are these different answers, religion, philosophy, or whatever, and we inform them through science and our experiences. But the questions stay the same, even though the answers, this is some argument, you know, the questions are universal. It said treasure the questions, and that's what I found valuable in it.
Great, thank you. Dennis, so what are your current beliefs? How do you describe them? What do they mean to you? Okay,
so after I sort of decided that Catholicism didn't hold water, I tried on other beliefs, Wicca, chaos magic, mysticism, all kinds of stuff. I thought it was really interesting. And I kind of come to the conclusion, very similar to what Alton, like a guiding principle for me is the first verse of the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be talked about is not the true Tao. So I know that as soon as I talk about God, that I'm wrong, or the higher power, whatever we want to call it. So in terms of beliefs, I guess I have a DIY spiritual belief set. And that means on a daily basis, it doesn't mean very much, honestly. Like I like science a lot, I teach science, and so I try to be correct in terms of physical laws and things like that. But at the base of it, I also believe that the way I kind of visualize it is that like maybe the consciousness is a sphere, and then each individual consciousness is like a tentacle that comes off of it. So it's a part of the whole thing, but it's sort of forgotten that it's the whole thing. If that makes sense. It does to me, and that's enough. All right, thanks.
All right, great, Michael. What are your beliefs? Can you describe them?
Well, I define as an atheist, certainly in circles such as this, or if somebody asks me what I believe, I often tell them I believe nothing. That I take things on the basis of the evidence and make an assessment as to whether or not there's evidence to support it and accept it as possibly or probably being true. And I just can't make that statement about God. I just find no evidence to believe that such an entity exists. One of the illustrations that I make is that there's no way that anybody in this room or myself could ever deny the existence of parents. Right? There's nobody here that can deny the existence of parents, or their own parents for that matter. In fact, my parents, through multiple means, I could prove that they exist. And yet, the existence of my parents is nothing compared to the existence of God when you consider the importance of the question. Do my parents exist, or does God exist? Obviously, the question of whether or not God exists is much more important. And yet, the evidence that we can't find to support his existence. In 2016, we shouldn't be able to stand here having a discussion about whether or not he exists, if he existed. Because the evidence should be so overwhelming that we just be like, okay, what do you want us to do? And we don't have that. So, yeah, I define myself as an atheist, but what I believe is what we've been talking about, humanism and getting people to be good people, to help drive this thing called civilization forward. That's what I believe is the important task.
Thank you. And if I may insert a comment, I do notice that a common theme between all three of you is the importance of questions and questioning things. That definitely is something that we as humanists and skeptics can agree with, even though we don't share the same titles. No point to that. I just wanted to throw that out there. Dennis, why don't we give you the next question? So your former beliefs, would you describe them as dogmatic? And do you feel that the dogmatism has some sort of effect on you? Or would you go farther and say maybe effect on society at large?
Well, I think so. I mean, I grew up in like I said, Irish Catholic family, so a lot of drinking and feeling guilty about it. For me personally, like when we first, like when I was young until 4th grade in Catholic school, beliefs were, you know, we went to church and it seemed like nobody really believed it. In terms of dogma, like I said, I think being circumcised, I think that's like evidence of, that's a dogma, you know, there's no good reason to do that in my opinion. But I guess like I said, in terms of guilt, like just feeling that things, you had to be on the straight and narrow all the time. And if you weren't, then you pissed somebody off. And you pissed, God off, and nobody wants to do that. But in terms of like greater society, I can see in my family, like I can see the dogma taking a toll in terms of like, it seems like a lot of people in my family don't challenge their beliefs. And I think that means, in general, that means like a limiting of experience and growth. You know, if you get a belief when you're 8 years old and you have it when you die at 88, then maybe you kind of missed some opportunities to grow as a human being. And what does that say for society in general? It could be a lot. Could be not. I don't know.
All right, Michael?
This is a dogma question, right? I certainly do believe that my beliefs were dogmatic, and it comes from being certain that you're right. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus is recorded to have said that we should go in through the narrow gate because the people that are going to get to live forever are this tiny little group, and Jehovah's Witnesses are convinced that it's them. So as a kid, as a young man, as an adult, I was convinced that I was right about the most important things in the universe. So that makes it easy to be right about everything else, too. Scientists don't know what they're talking about. I know better. That kind of thinking infected me up, and I'm still trying to force it back. I don't know better. I have to defer to experts. I don't know the answer to that because I wasn't trained in it. Those are things that are now becoming just like a regular part of my vocabulary. If you go to my Facebook page, I offer this sort of wide-ranging apology for being a dick, for being so certain that I was right about this or that or how I offended people. So very dogmatic, and it's still part of my personality that I'm trying to beat back.
And would you say Jehovah's Witness, as an organization, as a religion, has had negative effects on society where it's practiced?
Absolutely, yeah. A few ways come to mind. Every year, nobody knows the number. Jehovah's Witnesses die because they don't take blood transfusions. At their summer convention this year, my wife attended it. There's a horrible video that you can get on the web, where one of the leaders of this organization, they call it the governing body, he's at a convention in Tennessee, and he's telling a story about an 11-year-old boy that convinced a judge that it was his own demand, his own conscious decision, his rightful decision that he did not want a blood transfusion. And for some reason, the judge accepted it. Why a judge would accept the word of an 11-year-old indoctrinated kid is beyond me. But the judge accepted it, no blood transfusion was administered, and the kid died. And you can hear people in the audience clapping. Just horrible. So that's one. Another one is that Jehovah's Witnesses are becoming well known, not that it's rampant, but that it happens for childhood sexual abuse. And you can't blame the organization for that happening. There's bad people in every organization, but you can blame them for not reporting it to the authorities. And the reason they don't report to the authorities is because they follow this biblical two-witness rule, which means if there wasn't two people there to see it, then you can't accuse the person of it. Well, most people, when they go to abuse a child, they make sure that there's not a second person there to watch. So that's another way. The third way, and this is the one that kind of crushes me the most because it's related to my family, is that I raised 2 children and taught them that the most important thing that they could do is spend whatever few years there are between now and Armageddon teaching other people to be Jehovah's Witnesses, not worrying about education, not worrying about money, not worrying about the things that young men should be worrying about. And I've essentially taught them to waste their lives. So yeah, I think it's damaging.
Thank you, Michael. Alton, do you, as your former dogmatic upbringing, had an effect on you, or do you think it's had an effect on society?
It'd be fair to call the upbringing dogmatic. It was certainly limiting. I wouldn't put it in the category of toxicity that you have with some very, very controlling groups. Like I say, I think the people that handled it in the healthiest way were the people that sort of, the lukewarm people who went to a service and kind of got their filler up, and then went on the road and went to the ball game. But the people who took it very, very seriously had a lot of quarrels because the dogmas have to be refined, and you would see really friendships broken up and families broken up over something that really didn't amount to anything, just somebody missed a logical trick somewhere. I think what Mike said here about the danger of any group that's sort of selling itself as we've got this answer, it's overselling by definition. And they're claiming to know more than they really know. And so a big danger there is you can have this sort of systematized naivete. You know, under all the taboo subjects or the subjects that just people don't know about or don't suspect, you know, the kind of abuse that can go on. You have a lot of people that should be watching this or should be taking care of this that just really don't know what to do and aren't watching for it. I think I would add another danger there. I think in my family and among friends from this group, some people stay comfortable with that low ceiling, but a lot of people say, you know, it's not right for me. Things happen when they react. It's not just the toxic things can happen when you stay in. Some toxic things can happen when you get out. Some people get into a group that's maybe worse because they seem to be more zealous or some other thing. So I've seen this. There's a branch of this. Some of you remember International Church of Christ in many college towns will have a branch of this, and they're very controlling. In the USA, they like to get college students and say, oh, come join us, you've got brothers and sisters, very strong recruiting. And very soon, the students are dropping out of college, and they're involved in this breakneck, guilt-driven activity. And this is something a lot of people get into because they find it more intense than before. And these groups will take the students for the college loan money, which they have to pay back after they've given it to the church and after they've dropped out. And so sometimes the reaction to something can land somebody into frying pan in the fire effect. I've seen that. Okay.
Of course, go ahead.
Mike, are your kids still believers?
Yeah.
Like you said, yes. All right, guys. What happened to our fourth panelist? He has nothing to say?
Yeah, he's not going to stay.
Okay, I hope don't raise him as a fundamentalist, tangible spherist. It is tangible, but it is a sphere.
Right, exactly.
All right, guys. Anything else you'd like us to say? All right, anything like you'd like to say, like us to know? Dennis, you can start.
Yeah, and kind of about raising a kid is like I have no intention to raise my son with dogmatic beliefs. Personally, I considered myself agnostic for a long time, meaning like I didn't know what was right or what was wrong. And I'm not sure if that's the correct way to use that term, but I just said I don't know. I was basically saying I don't know. And then I made the choice to believe, and I made the choice to believe because I enjoyed my life more when I believed that. And it wasn't like some dogmatic, man in white robe belief, but like I said, it's like a DIY spiritual belief set. And so I intend to raise him with the same sort of way. Like if I ever explain my beliefs to him, I'm going to tell him, these are Daddy's belief, and I don't know anything about it. It's just what I believe because pretty much I like to believe it. And I feel like my life is more enjoyable when I believe like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Alton, anything?
In embracing the questions, I feel that in going through life, what we really need, personally, it's ultimately personal, is we need a hypothesis. How does this work? How does it go together? And I described the one I settled on because it seems to leave enough room for exploration and accords well with science. Can I prove that there's an ultimate reality behind it? It just seems to work pretty well if I take it that way. I guess one thing I've had a chance to reflect on as an artist is just this. I think truth comes to us, we express it in two ways. One is factual, one is mathematical. And it uses A is not non-A, it works this way, it's linear. There's another way, and that's symbol. And in symbol, it's not just the facts and the words, it's also the feelings. And it's also, it can be both and. It can carry multiple meanings. Some of the meanings are community meanings, some of the meanings are very personal. And it won't quite be the same, it won't replicate the way facts and math will replicate in science. I think truth can be expressed both ways. And I think the great mischief of the kind of thing maybe that I grew up with is you're trying to make art or symbol do the work of science. You're trying to make science do the work of symbol or art. I think you can get just as much mischief either way. There are books. I'm glad for the time I spent reading the Bible. I'm glad for the time I spent reading Lao Tzu and Johnson. I'm glad for the time I spent reading the Bhagavad Gita and many of the great books. I wouldn't want to be without these books in human society. A book is a work of art. It's literature. It's an art form. And I kind of feel like maybe the thing as a society in making sure we can manage letting art do the work of art and letting science do the work of science is maybe not just good science education, also good humanities education. What is it? What are you looking at? Is it really respectful to take a story and treat it like a newspaper article when you don't know it's a newspaper article yet? You know, there are ways you treat art with respect. There's ways you treat science with respect. So that's what I come away with it. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael, anything else?
Nope. Real covered. If people have questions, they're welcome to ask. But,
fair enough. All right, guys, I'm going to switch mics with you. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please make it clear if you'd like it for the whole panel or for someone in particular, okay?
Thanks for sharing. I'm Tansi from Singapore. Well, let me just say that for people who come out of religions, and not me, I hardly had one before, you're the strongest. You're stronger than people like me. I think that you've seen the other side, and still you came out of that. So congratulations. My question is more for Alton. I could see you conducting while you were speaking. So the gestures were there. The gestures were there. But the question I have is more this. You mentioned that not having a musical instrument in the believed life. How did you sneak away learning the instrument and becoming a conductor today? When did you start?
The teaching in that church is that, oh gosh, how to get the history to it. The idea of this was that it was supposed to be non-denominational. In a world where there's lots of denominations, we are not going to be a denomination. So you go to the Bible and you say, okay, this is your order of discipline, how you're going to do things. And you find proof texts in there. Jehovah's Witnesses, proof texting group, right? And the proof text here was God never asked you for an instrument, so you don't give God an instrument. So in worship, you don't. And I've been in some services where they sang reduced versions of Handel's Messiah, but you don't have an instrument there, you know. But you could play instruments outside worship, you just don't give it to God. God didn't ask for it. So that's how I got into instrumental music and all the rest. And then, of course, through time, I just got through, gosh, you know, Handel wrote this for the orchestra, and he used it so well. And there's a symbol there, you know, it means something when the trumpet comes in and these sort of things. And that was part of the process of just finding the world was bigger than the God I was talking, you know. It was that. It's an interesting question, yes. That is kind of ironic that I was in this place, but not even a piano, you know.
Hello? Okay. My first question is for Dennis, because I'm an Irish Catholic boy as well, so I'm going to give you the privilege and the guilt of going first. I really like what you said about spirituality. I don't share those beliefs, but I do the same with my kids. It's 7 and 8 year olds. And like when they see my work and they're like, Daddy, you're an atheist, it's like, yeah, but I don't really know if God exists or not, and you're going to find your own path later on. And so that aspect of what you were saying, I think, is really commendable. And it's going to teach your kids to be really critical thinkers for themselves, and you're going to foster that. I think that's really commendable and brilliant. And I think it displays the difference between what we call spirituality versus organized religion. Like, I always define it as spirituality is picking your own nose in the privacy of your own house, But organised religion is picking your nose in the supermarket and wiping it on as many people as you can. So I think that's like a good definition, and I really respect your approach. Even though we don't share the exact same beliefs, but who does in the world? What two people share exactly the same beliefs? But I think that's fantastic. So I'll move on quickly. Sorry, but yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Second, Alden, you talked about the move to your church's very literal interpretation of the Bible, and using that as kind of, what did you call it, a treatise and things like that. And that comes from Martin Luther's move away from Catholicism to use sola scriptura as a doctrine. And you also raised a brilliant point about how that also brought a new kind of fundamentalism, where you take that word literally, all of the words literally, and then you have homophobia, you have all these problems that come in. And I think that was a really good point you raised. And last question is for Michael, or last comment, sorry, is for Michael. Yes, you were talking about your routine through the week, and I personally found that really interesting because it highlights that although the content of some of those beliefs, and they're dogmatic, they're intelligence killers and things like that, but I think the practices themselves are very valuable. And I guess I'll ask a question. Do you think that upbringing where you were made to sit down, analyze a passage, discuss it, debate it, and you're not sitting playing a game or something, a video game, a mind-numbing video game, or just sitting there zoning out in front of the television, you're actually made to intellectually engage, regardless of the beliefs and the content itself? Do you think that's had some positive impact? And also your public speaking training and things like that. So I guess that I'm saying this is funny from a militant atheist, but there is some value in some of the things that religious upbringing does give people. I mean, strip away the nonsense, but those kind of examples, do you think there's value in that?
I think that's a really valuable question, and the answer is yes. I was interviewed on a podcast called The Thinking Atheist. No, I'm sorry, not The Thinking Atheist. The Godless Spell Checker, maybe a year and a half ago. And a similar question came up, and absolutely, I mean, I tell people I had a great upbringing because I was taught how to be a kind young man. I was taught how to speak publicly. So there's a lot of good stuff that came out of it. The structure, it's good. Everyone around me has told me that I have an incredible work ethic, and I attribute that to my parents very much. So yeah, very much. The tough part is the baggage that came along with it, but absolutely, all in all, I still have to say I wish I wasn't raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but for sure, yeah, there was a good structure, good principles for moral living. That part very much.
Can I just ask one last? I'm sorry, is that too much? Okay, quickly. All right, Alden, last one. I studied Taoism under, I'm studying it for a master's in studies in religion under a Buddhist monk from the University of New England. So I know a little bit about it. I'm not an expert, but I have a brilliant quote from a Chinese poet. His name is Po Chu-yi. I'm pronouncing that terribly. About Lao Tzu's concept of the Wu Wei, of the non-action. And I really like this thing because I'm an eternal skeptic. It's really, I think it'll give you food for thought. Okay. Po Chu-yi said, "Those who speak know nothing. Those who know keep silence. These words, I am told, were spoken by Lao Tzu. But if we are to believe that Lao Tzu was himself one who knew, how comes it that he wrote a book of 5,000 words?"
Well, you know, one of the things I liked about his book is he tells you on the front page, I can't say anything about this. And then he talks. So it's kind of, he tells you the game. He blows the whistle on his own game right at the beginning. That really catches it. Thank you.
Michael, you've been on the Godless Spell Checker podcast as well, maybe with Deanne Murdoch. Stephen, I think I should send him an email, so we've got two speakers here, more or less connected with the podcast. Okay, so one more.
Just touching on what you said, that reminds me of the quote from Socrates, that I know nothing except the fact of my own ignorance. So, if you guys covered this in the first half when I had to tune you out to finish my presentation, as a former Christian believer myself, evangelical as a teenager, you've probably heard the same accusation, and I'm curious to hear. So there's two responses I get from Christians. Is either you had a negative experience, and I say, well, I wasn't Catholic, so. The other one was then you weren't a real Christian. So just curious what you guys, when you get those points.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. The question to me.
When people surely you get, you must not have been a real Christian if you're now.
I don't actually, like, I guess my family's been pretty tolerant. They don't really talk to me much about it. Like, we don't really talk about spiritual beliefs or things. Like, they know that I'm not practicing or believing, and so they don't really question me about. I don't get a lot of negative feedback from it.
I got it a lot after I quit. It's nonsense. People that pray, people that feel guilty, people that try to toe the line. If you're an elder, you're spending your free time helping other people, listening to their marriage problems, trying to help them when they did something that's against the religion's code. You're praying with them. For somebody to say that I wasn't really into it, that I didn't really buy it, it's nonsense. It's just a way for them to kind of make peace with themselves, that somebody who really did believe could turn their back on it and say, I don't believe this anymore.
All right, one more question over here.
你好，我的那个英文没有很好，所以我如果有问到那个问题刚刚提过，那就不太好意思。我想问问看哦，就是像就是像国外啊，周末不是有教会嘛？那教会的话是一个社区间凝聚感情的一个活动嘛。那如果今天没有去信仰基督教，比较没有去参与的话，那会不会在社区之间比较疏离这样子？
The church is the place where people come together. So if you don't go to a church, do you feel more distant to the other people in the community?
I'll just get a quick pass at that. When you leave the church, you lose your community, so you have to find new friends. For me, that was really difficult because I never knew how to make friends. When you're part of a big church like that, no matter where you go, you've got instant friends. You walk through the door and you got friends. I've joined a lot of meetup groups and I've started to form new friendships that way. And it takes some time, but yeah, when you leave a church, you lose your friends.
是你要问的问题吗？
对。Alternate.
I mean, I guess for me, by the time I was questioning beliefs, I was out of Catholic school and in college, and the church community wasn't such a big part of my life at that point anyway. So, yeah, some friends and family members, we grew distant, but it was just a minor bump in the road.
I'd say my experience is similar to Dennis. I always had a lot of friends outside. Music is a collaborative art form. You meet a lot of people who meet a lot of things, and so it wasn't difficult to evolve out of it. But there are groups, where there's the invisible wall. They encourage you to. One of the groups I mentioned that I've seen some people leave mine and get into, they have an invisible wall once they get you in, because they want you to cut off all of your relationships with family and friends, and it's only that group. And then they say, oh, you're free to go, you don't like it here. And, well, no, you're not. You lost your entire support group if you leave, and that's an important feature. Yes, being control. I'd be very suspicious of any group where they're discouraging you from having friends outside the group.
All right, guys. before we wrap things up, I just want to see maybe by a show of hands, how many of you have left or changed your religion? Consider yourself an ex religion. Interesting. Okay. So, whatever. We can't define it. You're welcome to choose. So, if you're interested, if you have more questions, there's many people here. You're welcome to ask. Well, with that, guys, I'd like to thank our three panelists, Michael Bigelow, Alton Thompson, and Dennis Dz, for their thoughtfulness, their eloquence, and their sharing of their personal stories. Let's give them a big round of applause.